Cold snow skates sideways under a street lamp. The laundromat is dark. The sign hums anyway. Officer_EC, calm-focused male officer, early 30s, medium athletic build, defined jawline, short-textured dark hair, light stubble, slightly tired eyes, natural skin texture with pores, tactical police uniform with subtle wear marks, grounded realistic expression, counts coins in a gloved palm. $5, always 5. A cardboard box rattles near the door. Donation bin, everything. $5, nylon, a chewed harness, a dented steel bowl. He drops the coins, one by one, too loud. In the alley, a dog stands like it's waiting for a command that never comes. K9_shadow, black and tan German Shepherd, black saddle pattern, black facial mask, golden tan fur, upright alert ears, amber eyes, small notch on left ear, muscular structure, realistic fur texture, tactical K9 harness. No bark, no approach, just eyes. Then footsteps, slow, controlled, behind the bins. Winter didn't fall in neat flakes tonight. It drifted sideways, thin, dry snow that looked more like dust in the streetlights, sweeping in low sheets across the asphalt as if the city was trying to erase its own footprints. Officer Ethan Cole stood under a buzzing lamp outside a closed laundromat and did what he always did when things felt uncertain. He counted. Not fast, not with panic. Counted the way you count breaths when your body wants to sprint but your mind insists on staying. Counted the way you inventory risks before you move. In his gloved palm, coins sat cold and dull, quarters, nickels, pennies, hard edges biting into skin through fabric. His other hand held a folded grocery receipt that had been creased and smoothed so many times it was almost soft. Ethan's posture didn't broadcast need. He carried himself like a man who could walk away from any room without turning his head, like a man who could stand still and make chaos move around him. But under the discipline, there was math. Every step this week had been math. The wind knifed through the gap between buildings, lifting the corners of his jacket. His breath fogged out in a steady stream. He kept it steady on purpose. 9 and 3, he thought automatically, hands on a wheel that wasn't there. Control wasn't a mood, it was a system. Across the street, a neon sign flickered, open, even though the storefront was dark. The place was closed, too. The whole block felt half abandoned, like it was holding its breath until morning decided whether it wanted to show up. On the laundromat wall, taped near the door, a handwritten notice flapped in the wind, warming center full, line for overflow around back. Ethan's eyes tracked it once, not because he needed the information, but because he needed to know where every variable was. He had learned long ago that the world rarely exploded without warning. You just didn't always know how to read the signs until after. He lowered his gaze to the coins again. The total came out the same, no matter how he stacked them. $5. That was what was left after rent, heat, electricity, food, and the kind of basics no one notices until they're missing. Ethan didn't carry a little notebook anymore. He'd stopped writing expenses down months ago because the pages started to look like accusations. But the habit never left his hands. He still counted, still accounted. A muffled rattle came from a cardboard box near the laundromat entrance. Ethan's head turned without hurry. The box was marked with thick black letters. Donation bin sale, everything, $5. The lid was half open, snow dusting the rim. A few things stuck out, mismatched gloves, a frayed scarf, a cracked plastic bowl. Ethan stepped closer, boots making that particular dry crunch that only happens when snow is too cold to melt. He didn't rummage like someone desperate. He moved like someone checking a scene. 2 fingers lifted the edge of a folded piece of nylon, dark chewed at one corner. A service harness, the kind you could strap onto a dog's chest to tell the world, this animal has a job, this animal belongs. Beside it, a steel water bowl sat dented and scratched, like it had spent time on concrete and been kicked by accident too many times. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. Not suspicion. Calculation. A harness and a bowl weren't necessities for him. They were for someone else. And Ethan hadn't planned to be responsible for anyone else tonight. He stood there for a few seconds while the wind pushed thin snow past his ankles. His mind did what it always did, ran scenarios. If he walked away, nothing changed. He went home to a small apartment that smelled like radiator heat and old coffee. He ate something simple. He stared at a wall until sleep decided whether to happen. If he spent the last $5, he had no cushion, no backup, no just in case. That was dangerous. Ethan didn't like dangerous when it was preventable, but something in him, some old part that had refused to go numb no matter how hard he tried, kept returning to the same detail. This harness could be the difference between owned and stray, between protected by policy and discarded by it. Ethan had seen how quickly systems swallowed the weak, sometimes not out of cruelty, sometimes just because it was easier. He picked up the harness in the bowl. The nylon was stiff with age, cold. It smelled faintly of wet dog and cheap detergent. The bowl rang softly when he set it against the harness, metal on metal, a small, clean sound in a world full of harsher ones. He dropped the coins into the donation lockbox slot, one after another, no hesitation in the final movement. $5. The sound of his last quarter clinking into the box felt louder than it should have. Ethan didn't react. He simply adjusted the harness under his arm and turned toward the back alley where the overflow line was supposed to begin. He wasn't going to look. He told himself that. The alley was narrow and wind-choked, filled with stacked trash bins and old snow that had been kicked into gray piles. The side of the building blocked most of the streetlight, leaving everything in a dim, cold wash. Ethan's eyes swept. Exit points, movement, shapes, breath. That was when he saw the dog. A German shepherd stood near the back door of the laundromat like it had been placed there on purpose. Not pacing, not begging, not whining. Standing, black and tan coat dulled by grime and winter, a thinness at the ribs that didn't scream starvation but did whisper hard weeks. One ear sat slightly off compared to the other, a small notch near the edge like an old story no one bothered to tell out loud. The dog's eyes were amber and steady. It looked at Ethan the way trained dogs look at handlers, not with hope, not with fear, but with assessment. Ethan stopped. He didn't rush forward, didn't extend a hand. He knew better than to offer sudden movements to an animal that had survived long enough to be cautious. The shepherd didn't back up. It didn't step forward either, just watched. Ethan's throat tightened in a way that wasn't about cold. He crouched slowly, lowering his profile. His knees bent with controlled precision, weight centered so he could rise fast if he needed to. He held the harness in his hands without lifting it yet. "Hey," he said softly. His voice was low, more vibration than sound. Not a command, not a plea, a marker of presence. The dog's ears twitched. Its posture stayed disciplined. Ethan angled the harness slightly so the dog could see it. A visual signal. No pressure. The shepherd's eyes flicked to the harness, then back to Ethan's face. A long moment passed. Then, with a deliberateness that felt almost human, the dog took one step forward. Not rushing, not submissive, testing. Ethan stayed still. The dog came close enough that Ethan could see the frost clinging to the fur around its muzzle. Close enough that he could smell it, the sharp, sour edge of cold coat and old city air. Ethan lifted the harness slowly. He didn't try to put it on right away. He just let the dog sniff it. The shepherd inhaled once, twice, then nudged the harness gently with its nose. Permission. Ethan slid the harness over the dog's head in one smooth practice motion, adjusted straps at the chest and ribs tight enough to sit properly, loose enough not to restrict breathing. His fingers moved with calm competence, like they'd done this 100 times. The dog didn't flinch. When Ethan clipped the final buckle, the shepherd exhaled, a soft huff, and stood a little taller. Like it recognized the symbol, Ethan set the water bowl down on the ground, poured the last of his bottled water into it, and stepped back. The dog waited again, eyes on Ethan, as if asking whether it was allowed. Ethan gave a small nod, not dramatic, just yes. The shepherd lowered its head and drank, not frantic, not guarding, just steady. Ethan watched and felt something shift in his chest, small, unfamiliar, and irritatingly alive. He didn't name it. He didn't have to. A sound came from behind the trash bins, soft, human, like fabric moving too quickly and cold. The dog's head lifted instantly, not barking, not lunging, just alert. Ethan rose to standing with the same quiet control. "Who's there?" he called, still low. A shape unfolded from the shadows. A young woman, not a girl old enough to be out here on her own, but wearing the kind of thin hoodie that belonged indoors. Her bare ankles showed above hospital socks that were already gray from slush. Her hair was tucked under a knit cap, but strands had escaped and stuck to her cheek. Her eyes were wide, not from surprise, from distance, like she wasn't fully here. When she saw Ethan, she froze. Her gaze snapped to the harness on the dog, then back to Ethan. Her breathing went shallow. Ethan didn't step toward her. He held both hands slightly away from his body where she could see them. Not surrender, not threat, just transparency. "It's okay," he said. "I'm not touching you." The words weren't magic. They rarely were. The woman's eyes flicked to his belt, to the outline of his radio, to the badge. Then she flinched, not because of Ethan's movement, but because a police cruiser rolled past the end of the alley, lights reflecting in the snow like a warning. The flash of red-blue hit her face. She recoiled hard, shoulders jerking, and for a second her expression collapsed into something raw and terrified. Ethan's mind recorded it instantly. Trigger. He lowered his voice further. "Hey," he said, "look at me, not the lights, just me." Her eyes didn't settle. They darted to exits, up, left, right, like prey. The dog, now wearing the harness, moved without being told. It stepped between Ethan and the woman, body angled not to block Ethan, but to shield her. It didn't touch her, just placed itself close enough that she could lean into it if she needed. She did. One hand grabbed the dog's shoulder fur and held on like a drowning person holds rope. Ethan didn't blink at the dog's choice. He filed it away. "Can you breathe with me?" he asked the woman. No answer. Ethan didn't repeat. Repetition can feel like pressure. He simply started breathing where she could see it. In through the nose. 4. Hold. 4. Out. 4. His shoulders rose and fell in calm increments. No rush, no drama. The dog's ribs moved too, steady and grounded. The woman's breath stuttered. Then, in tiny increments, it began to mirror. Ethan watched her eyelids flutter as she tried to return to the present. He recognized the fight. He'd fought it himself. He spoke again carefully. "I'm Ethan," he said. "This dog, he's with you?" Her mouth opened like she wanted to speak, then closed again. Her fingers tightened in the dog's fur. The dog's head turned slightly, checking Ethan, watching. Ethan kept his tone neutral. "I spent $5, he said quietly. That seemed to reach her. Her eyes focused, just for a second, on his face. Ethan held the harness strap between two fingers. "Bought the harness so he doesn't get picked up as a stray," he explained. "That's all." The woman swallowed. Her throat bobbed like it hurt. Ethan nodded once, as if acknowledging her effort without demanding more. Behind them, the warming center overflow line moved slowly. People shifted in place, shoulders hunched, faces tucked into scarves. No one looked too closely. Everyone out here had learned that staring could cost you. Ethan looked at the woman's socks again. The hospital pattern, the way her ankles were too thin. He also noticed the band on her wrist, white plastic, a hospital ID bracelet. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Again, not suspicion, but attention. "Are you hurt?" he asked. The woman shook her head too fast, too sharp. "Okay," Ethan said immediately. "No questions you don't want." He gestured toward the warming center sign. "They're full," he said. "Overflow line. You can try, but—" He paused, then added carefully, "They might not allow the dog." The woman's hand tightened on the shepherd again, like she already knew. Ethan exhaled slowly. "All right," he said, as if deciding something in his own mind. "We do next steps." He didn't say, "I'll save you." He didn't say, "Trust me." He said something quieter. "Let's get you warm," he said, "somewhere you can sit without being rushed." The woman stared at him. Suspicion fought exhaustion. Ethan kept his body turned sideways, less threatening. His hands stayed visible. "You don't have to tell me your name," he said. "Not tonight." The dog shifted its weight, still between them, still a calm barrier. After a long moment, the woman gave a tiny nod. Not agreement, consent to move. Ethan didn't lead. He walked beside, a half step back. The dog moved first, like it understood the shape of the decision. As they rounded the corner toward the overflow line, Ethan saw the city jacket worker near the entrance, clipboard in hand, posture too confident for someone doing shelter triage. He watched people like inventory, not humans. Ethan's instincts tightened like a strap. The worker's eyes landed on the woman's hospital bracelet, then on the dog. A faint smile touched his mouth. Quick, controlled. "Hey," the worker called, voice too friendly. "We can get her processed inside. Fast." The woman flinched. Her grip on the dog sharpened. Ethan stepped slightly between them, not blocking the worker completely, just claiming space. "We're fine," Ethan said. The worker's smile didn't change. "Policy says—" Ethan's gaze held steady. "What's your name?" Ethan asked. The worker blinked once, then recovered. "I'm with City Services." "That's not a name." The worker's eyes flicked away for half a second, toward the alley mouth, toward the street, like he was checking timing. Ethan noticed. The dog noticed too. Shadow's body became still in a new way, alert without movement, like a coiled spring that didn't want to break. The worker's voice softened, coaxing. "We can help her, officer. Just need a signature. Transport. She'll be safe." Ethan didn't raise his voice. He simply asked, "Transport to where?" The worker's smile thinned. "Facility intake." "Which one?" A pause, tiny but there. Ethan had his answer. The woman's breathing started to stutter again. Ethan made a decision the way he always did, quietly, fully. "No," he said. The worker's expression hardened slightly. "You can't—" Ethan's voice stayed calm. "Watch me." He turned to the woman. "We're leaving." The woman hesitated. Shadow shifted closer to her leg, giving contact without pressure. Ethan tilted his head, a small signal. "Not far," he said. "Just warm, just quiet. Then we verify things the right way." The word verify did something for her. Something about it sounded like control, like safety. She nodded again, sharper this time. Ethan walked her away from the line. He didn't look back, but he felt the worker's stare on his spine like a hand. And he felt something else too. Movement. Not loud, not obvious, but there. Ethan kept his pace measured, controlled, like any normal walk home. Shadow walked on the woman's other side, perfectly balanced, silent communication already forming. Ethan's mind began cataloging details. Hospital bracelet. City worker too eager. No clear facility name. Timing checks. That smile. Patterns mattered. And Ethan Cole had not survived this long by ignoring patterns. Ethan didn't take the main street. Main Street had cameras. Main Street had people who noticed uniforms and asked questions. Main Street had patrol cars that rolled past in slow loops, and Ethan didn't want the girl's nervous system to keep colliding with blue and red reflections. He took the side blocks, quiet corridors of brick and shuttered storefronts where the wind carved channels between buildings and the snow had been left to accumulate in soft drifts. The girl walked like her body was trying to remember how to exist in open air. One foot, then the other, small steps, no wasted movement. Her fingers stayed braided into Shadow's fur. Shadow moved with a calm that felt practiced. Not docile, not weak, just regulated. Each time the girl's breathing hitched, the dog subtly adjusted his pace, leaning closer without crowding, keeping contact available like a steady hand on a shoulder. Ethan watched it without comment. He'd seen K9S do tactical work. Track, bite, hold, clear rooms. This was different. This was a dog doing the job no one filed a report for, keeping a human from falling apart. They reached Ethan's building in under 10 minutes, a squat, aging complex with a half-broken light over the front door and a stairwell that smelled like old paint and radiator heat. Not a place you showed off, not a place anyone chose unless they needed the rent to be predictable. Ethan unlocked the door and paused. He didn't usher them in fast. Fast made people feel trapped. He stepped aside, letting the girl decide the angle, letting her see the interior before she crossed the threshold. "Small," he said simply. "Warm enough." The girl's eyes scanned, corners, windows, exits, anything that could surprise her. Ethan's apartment wasn't decorated. It was organized. A narrow table by the wall. 2 chairs pushed in with squared precision. A couch that had seen too many winters. A shelf with folded clothes stacked tight like it was a ritual. Shadow stepped in first, sniffing once, then stopping near the heater vent like he'd been invited. The girl followed. Ethan closed the door gently behind them. The sound wasn't loud, but it was final enough that her shoulders rose. Ethan didn't speak into that tension. He just moved. He hung his coat by the door, then walked to the thermostat and nudged it up 2 degrees. Not too high, not fast. He knew how bodies responded when they warmed too quickly. He knew how people who'd been cold too long sometimes panicked at the sensation of heat. He grabbed the blanket off the couch and laid it on the floor near the heater. "You can sit there," he said, nodding toward it. Or the couch. Your call." The girl didn't answer. She lowered herself slowly to the blanket like she didn't trust the floor to hold her weight. Shadow folded down beside her immediately, his body angled between her and the door without blocking her view. Ethan set the dented water bowl down near Shadow and poured more water. Then he hesitated. Food. He'd already spent his last $5. What he had now was whatever remained from the week's careful math. He opened his fridge. Cold air spilled out, pale light catching the edges of 2 eggs, a half loaf of bread, a small container of cheap deli meat, and a couple of cans stacked like soldiers. He stared at it for a moment with the quiet resignation of a man who did not allow himself luxury. Then he took the deli meat. He set 3 slices into a bowl and placed it on the floor a few feet from Shadow. He didn't push it closer. He didn't try to win the dog. He just offered. Shadow didn't eat immediately. He looked at Ethan first, measuring, waiting for a signal. Ethan nodded once. Shadow ate with restraint, slow, deliberate bites, no guarding, no frantic chewing. Hunger was there, but discipline was stronger. The girl watched Shadow eat, like she couldn't decide whether it was safe to feel relief. Ethan poured water into a mug and brought it over. "Drink," he said softly. Not as an order, as permission. She took it with both hands. Her fingers were red and cracked, nails bitten short. The mug trembled slightly. She sipped, once, twice, then held it like warmth mattered more than hydration. Ethan sat down in the chair opposite her, far enough to give space, close enough to be present. He kept his hands visible, palms resting on his thighs. He waited. Silence was not empty for Ethan. Silence was data. The girl's eyes kept moving, but they began to slow. Her breathing smoothed out, the sharp edges rounding off. Shadow stayed still, the harness straps visible against his thick black and tan coat. Ethan's gaze dipped again to the hospital bracelet on her wrist. White plastic. A barcode. A name line he couldn't read from where he sat. He didn't ask for her name. Not yet. Instead, he asked something simpler. "Are you in pain?" he said. She swallowed. Her lips parted like words were difficult. "No," she whispered finally. The voice was dry, unused. Ethan nodded once, accepting. "You hungry?" he asked. She hesitated too long. Ethan read that hesitation the way he read a street corner. He stood, went back to the kitchen, and moved with careful economy. He tore 2 slices of bread and made a small sandwich with the remaining meat. No condiments, no perfection, just food. He brought it over and set it on the floor near her, not in her lap. "So you don't have to reach past me," he said quietly. Her eyes flicked up. Ethan didn't look away. She took the sandwich slowly, like it might disappear. Her hands shook as she lifted it. She took a bite. A small sound escaped her throat, almost a sob, but swallowed before it could become one. Ethan didn't react. If you reacted, you made it bigger. If you made it bigger, you made it harder for someone to survive. Shadow shifted slightly and pressed his shoulder into her leg. She leaned into him without thinking. Ethan watched that, too. Then, after a few minutes, he spoke again. "Back at the warming center," he said. "That guy. City jacket. He knew your bracelet." The girl's chewing slowed. Her gaze dropped to her wrist like she'd forgotten it existed. Ethan kept his tone level. "I'm not asking what happened," he said. "Not yet. I'm asking if you want to be found." Her head snapped up. The fear there was immediate, sharp, real. Ethan softened his voice even further. "Found by the right people," he clarified, "not whoever he was." Her shoulders loosened by a fraction. She shook her head once, tiny, violent. "No," she whispered. Ethan nodded. "Okay." He let that settle. Then he asked the next factual thing. "Do you have somewhere safe tonight?" he said. Her laugh came out wrong, thin and bitter. "This," she said, gesturing weakly to the blanket. "This is the first warm place in a while." Ethan's jaw tightened. He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He didn't say, "That's awful." He said what mattered. "Then you're staying," he said. "Tonight. No paperwork, no signatures." The girl stared at him, suspicion still there, but less sharp. "Why?" she asked, as if the question hurt. Ethan's throat tightened. He could have said 100 things. He could have said he was a cop. He could have said he couldn't ignore it. He could have said he knew what it felt like to be hunted by memories. Instead, he told the truth in the only way he knew how. "Because you're cold," he said, and because that guy didn't feel right. She looked away, eyes shining with something she refused to name. Shadow's ears twitched as if listening to a sound Ethan couldn't hear. Ethan stood again. "Bathroom's there," he said, pointing down the hall. "Towels in the cabinet. Hot water's not endless, but it exists." She nodded faintly. Ethan hesitated, then added, "Door locks." That made her eyes return to him. He nodded once, as if understanding what that detail meant. Then he walked to the kitchen and began clearing space on the counter, mind already moving into the next stage. Verification. Ethan didn't have many resources, but he had a phone, and he had habits. He pulled out a small notepad, not for money this time, but for facts. He wrote, "Hospital bracelet, city jacket worker, name unknown. Warming center overflow, dog-trained regulating girl, dissociative triggers, lights, authority." He stared at the list. The pattern was forming. He could feel it, like a scent trace just strong enough to follow. A soft sound came from the hallway, a door clicking. He exhaled slowly. He wasn't alone in the apartment. He had invited 2 strangers into his life in under an hour. That should have felt reckless. It didn't. It felt like something he'd been trained for, a crisis that required calm. Ethan didn't go to bed right away. He sat in the chair near the window, watching the street below through a curtain that never quite closed. He listened. The building settled, pipes clicked, wind hissed. Somewhere a neighbor coughed. Behind him the girl's breathing grew slower as warmth finally reached her bones. Shadow's breathing matched hers, deep and even. Ethan's own body remained alert. He'd learned long ago, when you let your guard down, the world took advantage. A faint thump came from the hallway. Ethan stood instantly, silent, fast, not loud, not dramatic. He moved toward the sound with measured steps, ready to intervene if needed. But when he reached the hall, he saw the girl standing there, dripping water from her hair, clutching the towel tight around herself like armor. Her eyes were wide. Not fear of Ethan, fear of herself. She started, then stopped. Ethan waited. Her throat worked. "I don't sleep." Ethan's stomach tightened. He nodded slowly. "Then you don't," he said. "Not if you can't." She looked at him like she expected pressure. Ethan offered none. "There's a spot on the couch," he said, "or the blanket. You choose." She stared past him toward the living room, where Shadow lay. She whispered, and her voice cracked. "He stays close." Ethan followed her gaze. Shadow lifted his head, ears forward. He stood and padded toward her without a sound. He stopped at her knee and leaned lightly into her, steady contact. The girl's eyes closed briefly. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for days. Ethan stepped back. "You can keep him," he said. "No one's taking him." A tremor ran through her shoulders. She nodded once. Ethan returned to his chair by the window. He didn't sleep. He simply watched the street and listened to the apartment breathe. Hours passed in slow increments. Then the night broke. It wasn't a loud sound. It was a change in air, like pressure shifting. Shadow rose. No bark, no growl, just alertness. Ethan's eyes snapped open fully. "What is it?" he whispered, mostly to himself. Shadow moved to the door and sat, ears forward, body still, waiting. Ethan stood and approached the door without turning on lights. He placed his hand near the lock and listened. Footsteps in the hallway, slow, too controlled, stopping outside his door. A pause. Then a soft scrape, like someone brushing past the doorframe. Ethan's body went cold. He didn't reach for his weapon, not yet, not without confirmation. He leaned closer, eye to the peephole. A shadow moved outside, too close to the door to make out a face. The hallway light flickered. The shape paused again, like someone checking a unit number. Ethan's jaw tightened. Shadow's posture shifted, weight forward. Ethan breathed once, slow and silent, then backed away from the peephole. He moved to the kitchen counter where his phone lay, screen dark. He didn't call 911 yet, not without knowing what this was. He opened the camera app and angled it toward the door discreetly, recording. The footsteps moved again. 1 step, 2. Then they stopped. A soft knock. Not urgent, not friendly, controlled. Ethan didn't answer. The girl stirred on the couch, eyes snapping open, as if her nervous system had been waiting for this exact sound. Shadow moved instantly to her side, pressing his body against her. Ethan raised one hand, palm down, a silent signal. Stay. He approached the door slowly and spoke through it without unlocking. "Who is it?" he asked. A beat. Then a voice, smooth, practiced. "City Services," it said. "We're doing a welfare check." Ethan's gaze sharpened. He kept his voice calm. "Welfare check for who?" he asked. Another beat. Too long. "For a resident," the voice said. Ethan almost smiled. Almost. "Name the resident," he said. Silence. The voice cleared its throat. "Officer," it said, trying to shift into authority. "Open the door." Ethan's spine went rigid. That was the city jacket man's cadence. Not the exact same voice, but the same script, the same pressure pattern. Ethan's eyes flicked to the girl's hospital bracelet again. She had pulled the blanket tight, shaking. Ethan didn't open the door. He stepped back and spoke clearly, voice firm but controlled. "Leave," he said. "Now." Silence. Then the footsteps retreated, slowly, not running. Ethan held his position until he heard the stairwell door close. Only then did he exhale. The girl's breathing was ragged. Shadow pressed closer. Ethan turned to her. "Listen," he said quietly. "That's why we don't go back to that line." Her eyes were wet. "They," she whispered. "They follow." Ethan nodded once. "I know." He sat on the edge of the chair, lowering himself to reduce pressure. "I'm going to ask you a question," he said. "You don't have to answer, but it will help me keep you safe." The girl swallowed hard. "What's your first name?" Ethan asked. She stared at Shadow, then at Ethan. Her lips trembled. "Lily," she whispered. Ethan nodded. "Lily." He didn't push for last name, not yet. He asked the next factual thing. "Hospital," he said. "Which one?" Lily's eyes squeezed shut. I don't know," she whispered. They moved me." Ethan's jaw tightened. Moved her. That wasn't normal. "Okay," Ethan said. "Then we do it a different way." He stood and picked up his phone. "I'm calling my captain," he said. "She's not like that guy. She's a straight line. If I'm wrong, she'll tell me. If I'm right, she'll move." Lily's eyes widened. "No police." Ethan's voice softened. "I am police." Her breath hitched. Ethan didn't flinch. "And I'm not letting you get erased," he said. The words came out colder than he intended. Lily stared at him like she couldn't decide whether to trust anger when it was directed at her enemy. Shadow's head lifted, eyes tracking Ethan. Ethan took a breath, then dialed. Captain Maria Hayes answered on the second ring, her voice sharp with fatigue. "Cole," she said, "it's past midnight." Ethan kept it brief. "Need you," he said. "Off-duty situation. Potential coercion pipeline using warming center overflow. City Services impersonation. Possible hospital record manipulation." A pause. Hayes's tone changed. Pragmatic. Focused. "Where are you?" she asked. Ethan gave the address. "Alone?" Hayes asked. "Me," Ethan said. "And a civilian. And my K-9. Another pause. Curiosity. But no judgment. "Explain," Hayes said. Ethan explained in controlled bursts. The harness, the girl, the bracelet, the city jacket worker, the scripted pressure, the knock at his door. Hayes listened without interruption. When he finished, her voice was quiet. "Do not go solo," she said. "Do you understand me?" "Yes," Ethan said. "Keep her where she is," Hayes continued. "No movement until I verify. I'm sending Lucas, and I'm calling Lena." Ethan's shoulders eased slightly. "Thank you," he said. Hayes didn't soften. "Cole," she said. "If this is real, they'll try again. Lock down. Document everything." "Yes, ma'am," Ethan said. He hung up and looked at Lily. "You hear that?" he said softly. "Back up." Lily's eyes flicked to the door. "They'll come," she whispered. Ethan nodded. "Maybe." Shadow sat upright, ears sharp, body angled toward the hallway like he'd already accepted the job. Ethan returned to his notepad and wrote. "Lily, first name, unknown hospital. Moved welfare check knock, scripted pressure, repeat interest in bracelet." He stared at the list until the words stopped being ink and became a shape. A pipeline. Not one predator, not one moment. A system. And systems didn't stop until someone forced them to. Lucas arrived just before dawn. 3 knocks, then a pause, then one more. A pattern Ethan recognized, agreed upon, not random. Ethan checked the peephole. Deputy Lucas Reed stood in the hallway, cheeks red from cold, eyes alert. He raised his hand slightly like he expected Ethan to be cautious. Ethan unlocked the door. Lucas stepped in quietly and immediately lowered his voice. "Captain Hayes said," he began, then stopped when he saw Lily and Shadow. His expression softened, but he didn't approach. Instead, he offered a small, gentle humor, light enough not to crack the room. "Okay," Lucas said, rubbing his hands together. "I brought, exactly 0 miracles, but I did bring coffee." He lifted a small cup. Lily stared at him like coffee was a foreign concept. Shadow watched Lucas, then looked at Ethan. Ethan nodded once. Lucas relaxed slightly. Ethan kept it procedural. "Sit," he told Lucas, nodding toward the chair. Lucas sat. He didn't take his eyes off Lily, but he kept his gaze low, non-threatening. Hayes called 15 minutes later. "Lena's on," she said. "Put her on speaker." Ethan did. Dr. Lena Moore's voice came through, calm, thoughtful, precise. "Ethan," she said, "tell me about the bracelet." Ethan described it. White plastic, barcode, partial text he hadn't read. Lena exhaled softly. "Can you read the number?" she asked. Ethan looked at Lily. "I need to see it," he said gently. "Only the numbers." Lily's hand tightened. Shadow shifted closer, pressing into her leg. Lily swallowed, then slowly lifted her wrist. Ethan didn't grab it. He leaned in just enough to read, then leaned back. He recited the numbers to Lena. There was typing on the other end, fast, controlled. Then Lena's voice hardened a fraction. "It's flagged," she said. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Flagged how?" "Not for crimes," Lena replied. "For non-compliance and repeat discharge. But the timestamps don't match typical charting patterns. Something's altered." Hayes' voice cut in. "Meaning?" Lena answered carefully. "Meaning someone is manipulating records to make it look like she refuses help, leaves voluntarily, disappears from accountability." Lily's face drained of color. Lucas swore softly under his breath, then immediately apologized with a glance toward Lily. Ethan's voice stayed calm. "Can you trace where she was moved?" he asked. Lena paused. "Not directly," she said. "But I can see the last facility that entered data. It's a contracted intake clinic, not a hospital, and it shares billing ties with a services vendor used at the warming center." Hayes' tone sharpened. "That's our link." Ethan's gaze locked forward. The city jacket worker, not city. Vendor. Hayes spoke like a command. "Cole, Reed, do nothing until I arrive," she said. "We're not spooking them without leverage." Ethan nodded, even though she couldn't see. "Understood," Lily's voice was a whisper. "They take people," she said. Ethan looked at her. "Who?" he asked. She shook her head. I don't know. It's like, you go to get warm, you sign, you wake up somewhere else, and they say you agreed." The words hit the room like ice. Ethan's fingers flexed once, then stilled. He didn't promise vengeance. He promised process. "Okay," he said. "Then we document. We verify. We build a chain that can't be cut." Lily stared at him. "You won't leave me?" she whispered. Ethan's voice stayed steady. "No," he said, "not while I'm breathing." Shadow let out a soft huff as if confirming the contract. Outside the window, the snow continued to fall, pale and relentless. Inside, Ethan Cole's world had narrowed into something he could handle, a vulnerable civilian, a dog who understood steadiness better than most people, and a system that needed to be forced into the light. Captain Maria Hayes arrived just after sunrise when the sky was still gray and undecided. She didn't come in with sirens. She didn't come with a convoy. She came the way she always did, quietly, efficiently, without performance. A plain coat, no hat, gloves in her pocket. Her presence alone changed the room's temperature. Ethan opened the door before she knocked. Hayes stepped in, took in the scene. In one sweep, Lily on the blanket near the heater, Shadow pressed against her leg, Lucas standing with coffee like it was a peace offering, Ethan's notepad open on the table. Hayes' eyes landed on Shadow's harness, then on Lily's hospital bracelet, then on Ethan. "You did right bringing her off the line," Hayes said. No praise, just fact. Ethan nodded once. "They came here." Hayes' jaw tightened. "I figured." She crouched, slow, careful, so she was closer to Lily's eye level, but not inside her space. "I'm Captain Hayes," she said. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want. I'm here so you don't get rushed." Lily stared at her like she didn't trust calm. Hayes didn't flinch. She waited. After a long moment, Lily's voice emerged, thin. "They said it was help," she whispered. Hayes nodded. That's how predators like to dress. Lily's eyes flicked toward the door, then to Shadow. Hayes followed her gaze, then said gently, "Your dog can stay with you. No separation." Lily's shoulders dropped by a fraction. It wasn't peace, but it was less terror. Hayes stood and turned to Ethan and Lucas. "Outline," she said. "Short." Ethan gave it to her. Bullet points, clean, no emotion. The city jacket worker, scripted pressure, bracelet interest, knock at the door, Lena's flagged record, vendor tie. When he finished, Hayes nodded once. "We need confirmation that the vendor is actively moving people," she said. "We need probable cause that isn't just instincts." Ethan's eyes stayed steady. "So we go back." Hayes didn't like it. Ethan saw it in her face, concern, risk assessment, the knowledge that returning could escalate. But Hayes also understood something deeper. Sometimes the only way to stop a system is to let it reveal itself. Hayes looked at Lucas. "You're with Ethan, no deviation." Lucas nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Hayes looked at Ethan. "You keep your head. You do not play hero. You document, you preserve, you protect her, you keep Shadow safe. Understood?" "Yes," Ethan said. Hayes' gaze shifted toward Lily. "We're not taking her back into that line," Hayes said. "She stays here." Lily's eyes widened. "Alone?" "No," Hayes said immediately. "I'll have someone with you." She didn't say who. She didn't need to introduce another character. She simply made it a promise in the tone of command. Hayes turned to Ethan again. "Before you go," she said, "I want Lena's confirmation in writing." Ethan nodded. He dialed Lena, put her on speaker. Lena's voice came through like ice water, clear, precise. "I can generate a preliminary report," Lena said. "Flagged records, vendor billing ties, timestamp anomalies. It won't be enough alone, but it establishes manipulation." Hayes' tone stayed measured. "Send it, immediately." "I already am," Lena said. Ethan felt his phone vibrate seconds later with an incoming file. Hayes nodded once. "Good." She straightened and looked at Shadow. Shadow looked back. The dog's eyes were steady, amber, intelligent, the kind of gaze that made you feel like you were being measured and approved or rejected. Hayes exhaled quietly. "Good dog," she murmured. Shadow didn't wag. He didn't perform. He simply held the room. Ethan and Lucas geared up without dramatics. Coat, gloves, phone, body cam. Ethan clipped his body cam onto his jacket, tested the angle, then looked at Lucas. "Keep your mouth shut unless it helps," Ethan said. Lucas gave a half smile. "So? Normal." Ethan didn't smile back, but something in his eyes softened. A fraction. Before Ethan left, he crouched near Lily again, staying outside her space. "We're not gone long," he said. "Door's locked. Hayes is here." Lily's fingers tightened in Shadow's fur. "Don't!" she started. Ethan waited. "Don't let them take him," she whispered. Ethan's voice stayed steady. "No one's taking Shadow," he said. Shadow lifted his head slightly at his name, ears twitching. Alert. Ethan stood and left with Lucas, pulling the door shut behind him. The hallway smelled like stale heat and old carpet. The stairwell echoed each step. Ethan kept his breathing slow. Outside, the cold hit like a slap. They walked to the warming center 2 blocks away, blending into the morning's quiet traffic. No sirens, no uniform display. Just 2 men moving with purpose. The warming center overflow line was still there, thinner now, but still desperate. People shifted from foot to foot, faces tucked into scarves, eyes hollow. Ethan's gaze swept the crowd. He didn't stare, he tracked. Near the side entrance, the city jacket worker stood with the same clipboard, same posture, same practiced smile. Ethan's spine tightened. Lucas leaned in, voice low. "That him?" Ethan nodded once. "Yeah." They approached as if they belonged. Ethan didn't play confrontation. He played compliance. He held his phone loosely in his hand, recording without advertising it. The body cam ran too, angle catching the worker's face. Ethan stepped forward. "Morning," Ethan said calmly. The worker's smile flickered. Recognition. Quick. "Officer," he said, voice too smooth. "Back already?" Ethan kept it neutral. "You do intake," Ethan said. "City services," the worker replied. Ethan tilted his head slightly. "Which department?" The worker's smile tightened. "Vendor contracted," he corrected quickly, like he'd been coached. That was a tell. Ethan nodded once as if accepting. "Okay, vendor." Ethan leaned closer just enough to lower the volume. "Welfare check at my apartment last night," Ethan said. "That you?" The worker's eyes didn't widen. He didn't deny fast. He smiled again, slower. "Officer," he said softly, "we're just trying to help." Ethan held his gaze steady. "Help who?" Ethan asked. The worker's eyes flicked briefly to the line, then back. "People who need it," he said. Ethan nodded. "Then you won't mind explaining your transport process." The worker's smile vanished. His tone shifted into mild irritation. "Are you interfering with services?" he asked. Ethan didn't answer the question. He asked his own. "Where do you take them?" The worker's jaw tightened. Ethan saw his right hand adjust the clipboard like he was getting ready to move, to signal. Shadow wasn't here, but Ethan had Shadow's instincts inside him now. Pattern recognition, body language, the moment before flight. Lucas shifted slightly to Ethan's left, subtle block, casual stance. The worker's eyes flicked to Lucas, then back to Ethan. "You need to step away," the worker said. Ethan's voice stayed even. "I need you to say the facility name," Ethan said. "On record." The worker's lips pressed together. Then he smiled again, but it was colder now. "Officer," he said, "you don't know what you're walking into." Ethan's heartbeat didn't change. He leaned in slightly. "Try me," Ethan said. For the first time, the worker's mask cracked, just a fraction. Then he shifted his weight and stepped back. "Fine zone," he said. "You want facility? Intake clinic on 9th? That's where. Happy?" Ethan's phone captured it. Ethan nodded. "Good." The worker turned as if done. Ethan watched him angle toward the side alley. Lucas murmured, "He's moving." Ethan nodded once. "Follow," Ethan whispered. "Distance." They moved like shadows, not chasing, just tracking. The worker cut behind the building where the snow had been trampled into gray mush. Ethan kept his steps silent, breath slow. He watched the worker's shoulders, the way he looked left and right, not like someone late for work, but like someone checking for witnesses. The worker reached an unmarked van parked behind the building. White, no logo. Ethan's jaw tightened. The side door slid open a few inches. A figure inside spoke, unseen. The worker leaned in and said something Ethan couldn't hear. Lucas's hand hovered near his radio. Ethan raised one finger. Wait. They needed the move, the act, the undeniable. The line at the warming center shifted. Someone stepped out of it. A woman in a thin coat, hands shaking, eyes down. She moved toward the side entrance, likely told she could be processed faster. Ethan's stomach tightened. The worker turned and gestured her toward the van. There it was, the moment when help became capture. Ethan's voice stayed low. "Now," he said. Lucas keyed his radio, quiet code. Hayes responded instantly in his earpiece. "Go," she said. "Units en route." Ethan stepped out from behind the corner. "Stop!" he commanded. The worker's head snapped up. The woman froze, confusion splashing across her face. The worker's smile returned, thin and venomous. "Officer," he said, "you're making a mistake." Ethan's voice stayed level. "Step away from her," Ethan said. The worker's eyes flicked to the van door. Inside, movement shifted, someone preparing. Lucas moved to the woman, staying gentle. "Ma'am," Lucas said softly, "come with me. You're safe." The woman hesitated. The worker's voice sharpened. "She signed," he snapped. "She agreed." Ethan's gaze locked on the clipboard. "Show me," Ethan said. The worker's hand tightened around it. Ethan stepped closer, controlled, not rushing. "Put the clipboard down," Ethan said. The worker's posture changed. He was about to bolt. Ethan read it instantly. The worker lunged toward the van door. Ethan moved, not as fast as panic, as fast as training. He grabbed the worker's arm and twisted, using leverage, not force, turning the clipboard away. The worker snarled, trying to wrench free. Lucas stepped in, assisting. The van door slid open wider. A second man inside reached out, hand grabbing toward the woman. The woman screamed, a thin sound, pure terror. Ethan's body went cold. He shifted position, using his own body to block the reach, pushing the door back with his shoulder. The man inside tried to pull. Ethan held. Not rage, not heroics, containment. He heard sirens in the distance now, real, closing. The worker struggled, spitting curses. Ethan kept his voice low, steady. "It's over," he said. The man inside the van swore and tried to slam the door shut. Ethan jammed his boot against the track, preventing it. Seconds stretched. Then the alley filled with boots and authority. Uniformed units flooding in, weapons drawn, commands shouted. Captain Hayes appeared at the edge of the scene like a blade, calm, controlled, eyes sharp. "Hands!" she barked. The man inside froze. The worker went limp as if realizing the game had ended. Hayes' officers took them fast, cuffing, securing, separating. Ethan stepped back, breath steady, body humming with restrained adrenaline. He looked at Lucas. Lucas was crouched beside the shaken woman, voice soft, grounding her. "You're okay?" Lucas murmured. "You're okay. Look at me. Breathe." Ethan's chest tightened. He'd seen this too many times, humans turning into targets when they were most vulnerable. Hayes approached Ethan. "You got it on camera?" she asked. Ethan lifted his phone. "Yes." Hayes nodded once. "Good." She looked at the clipboard, now lying in the snow, pages fluttering. "Evidence," she said. A detective stepped in to bag it. Hayes's eyes flicked to Ethan again. "Now we move," she said. Ethan nodded. "Lily?" Hayes's gaze sharpened. "We protect her identity. We protect the dog." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Shadow stays." Hayes nodded once. "Shadow stays." They returned to Ethan's apartment with no sirens this time, but the air felt different. The world had shifted. A door had opened that couldn't be closed again. When Ethan stepped inside, Lily looked up instantly, fear flaring. Hayes lifted a hand. Calm. "It's done," Hayes said. "Not finished, but done enough." Lily's breath shook. Shadow moved closer to her, pressing his shoulder into her leg. Ethan crouched near her again. "They tried to take someone else," Ethan said quietly. "We stopped it." Lily's eyes filled. "You?" she whispered. Ethan didn't take credit. He nodded toward Hayes. "She moved," he said. "Lena confirmed. Lucas backed. Shadow's here." Lily's gaze drifted to Shadow's harness, then back to Ethan. Her voice trembled. "I thought no one sees us," she whispered. Ethan's chest tightened. "I see," he said. A tear slid down her cheek, slow and silent. Hayes watched her for a moment, then spoke softly. "We're going to get you safe," Hayes said. "A place that doesn't move people in the dark, a place that doesn't erase." Lily's eyes widened. "No," she whispered quickly. "No facilities." Hayes nodded. "Not a facility." Ethan's brow furrowed slightly. Hayes glanced at him, then at Lily. "A space," Hayes said carefully. "A room. People you can learn, not be processed." Lily swallowed, suspicious but desperate. Shadow leaned in, steady contact. Ethan took a breath. He knew what Hayes meant. Not a system that swallowed people, a system that held them. Over the next weeks, the case unfolded like frozen machinery finally forced to move. Vendor contracts pulled, funding trails traced, names connected. Lena's reports grew heavier. Patterns, timestamps, altered records. Hayes did what she always did, made it official, made it real, made it hard to bury. Lucas became the bridge between heavy and human, showing up with coffee, making small jokes that didn't dismiss pain, just loosened its grip. And Ethan. Ethan did what he didn't think he could do anymore. He stayed. He helped build a place that didn't demand explanations, a small storefront near the edge of downtown, donated by a community partner Hayes pressured into doing the right thing. A few chairs, a coffee pot, soft lights, no loud TVs, no shouting, no forms shoved across tables. A sign hung near the door. Still watching. Lily picked the name. She said it fit. Because Shadow never stopped watching. Because Ethan never stopped scanning exits. Because the people who came in, veterans, survivors, anyone whose nervous system had been trained by fear, didn't need to pretend they were fine. They could just exist. Shadow became the heartbeat of the room. He seemed to know who needed him before they did. He'd settle beside someone whose leg bounced uncontrollably. He'd rest his head on a knee that trembled. He'd sit across from a man staring at the floor like it held all the names he'd lost. One afternoon, during a breathing exercise, Lena ran, quiet, careful. Shadow stood up, walked to the center of the room, and flopped down dramatically with a soft huff, like he was demonstrating what relaxation looked like. For a second, no one moved. Then Lucas laughed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't forced. It was surprised. And it cracked something open. Others laughed too, small, careful laughs, as if they didn't trust joy yet. Ethan watched from the corner, arms crossed, face unreadable. But inside, something shifted. Not healed, not fixed, just less alone. One evening, after closing, snow fell again outside the window. Soft, relentless, familiar. Lily stood by the doorway, looking out at the street. Ethan approached, stopping beside her, not crowding. "I'm not fixed," Ethan said quietly, as if the admission was a report. Lily's lips pressed together. "Me neither." Ethan nodded once. "But I can stand here," he said, "with you." Lily looked at him, eyes wet. "That's enough," she whispered. Shadow padded over and sat between them, solid and warm. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, no one was being erased anymore. Not by paperwork, not by fear, not by silence. Sometimes the biggest change didn't come with thunder. Sometimes it came with $5 spent on a harness, a door held open without questions, and the decision over and over to stay.